Welcome everybody to this episode of the Bob Pizzini Show, coming to you from West Palm Beach, Florida, or very close to West Palm Beach from the Podfinity Nation studios. And what a privilege it is for me to be asked to join the Podfinity Nation podcast lineup. And there's several great hosts who use this studio for their podcasts. And I'm down here in Florida. I live in Virginia, but I'm down here recording an incredible episode with an incredible guest. My guest today is Brad McDonald, and I have to say that Brad has actually been on my other show, the Elevate Your Leadership podcast, many years ago. We have a mutual friend, and Brad has an impressive career. I'm just going to touch on his bio real quick, and we're going to get into the discussion. But before I do that, Brad, welcome to the Bob Pizzini Show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. And I'm in your home state, Virginia.
That's right. And you know what? I think it's warmer up there today than it is here in West Palm Beach, believe it or not. So Brad McDonald is a retired Navy captain. He is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and was an original influencer as the commanding officer of the USS L, MENDEL RIVERs, a fast attack submarine dedicated to SEAL operations. After his military service, Brad became a business owner and author. His book, The Art and Skill of Sales Psychology, provides critical insights on human behavior that inspires readers to understand, identify, and learn from the physiological motivators that cause buyers and sellers to do what they do. Brad, very modest bio, especially given your military career, but we're going to bring that out through this discussion. Welcome once again, and how did you get interested in submarines?
When I was 9 years old, I was cruising down the Cooper River aboard USS Senate, SS-408, a submarine that was built at the end of World War II. Now, this was in 1964, and my father, E.R. McDonald, Jr., was the commanding officer of the submarine. And I was sitting in the captain's chair on a Saturday morning as we cruised down the Cooper River. I think he was moving the ship from the Naval Weapons Station down to the main base, and I got to ride along. The stewards were bringing me chocolate milk and donuts, treating me like a prince, and I was watching my dad con the ship and direct the line handlers, and I was very, very impressed. And I remember thinking to myself, this looks pretty cool. I'd like to do this one day. That was I always say that was sort of the birth of the dream, was my father's submarine career. And luckily, I was one of the fortunate guys that had a father that was worth emulating. And he was absolutely a mentor and a very nurturing, wonderful man. And I always kind of wanted to be like him. So I had three ambitions as a young boy. One was to be an NFL football player, and that lasted about one day. And the other two were to be an FBI agent or to be a submarine captain. And I kind of went the way of the submarine captain. So that's kind of how it started, Bob.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. So it's literally in your DNA, and it's great that you had such a wonderful role model to emulate professionally and in all other aspects of life, of a young man being raised. That's pretty cool. Where were you raised in Charleston then, or what do you call your hometown? Where'd you grow up?
We moved around a lot due to my father's career, and the first 5 years, I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. We quickly, not long after I was born, my dad got orders to California, and that's my first memories of life are in my first 5 years in California. But we lived in Washington, D.C., Charleston, South Carolina. I also lived in Scotland for a couple years when I was 11, 12, 13 years old, because in the 60s, 70s, 80s, up to the early 1990s, there was an American submarine base in Holyloch, Scotland, and my dad was stationed there for a couple years.
Wow, okay. And then where did you complete high school?
Oh, after Scotland, we moved back to Washington, D.C., and my father had a tour in Vietnam, but the family just stayed right in Washington, D.C. And I attended St. John's College High School in Washington, D.C., which was a boys' Catholic military high school. It was quite a bit of a heavy-handed the teaching and leadership there between the Christian Brothers and the retired World War II Army Master Sergeants and one Colonel, those guys ran our life. They taught me how to march with and shoot a rifle at the age of 14 and 15, and the Christian Brothers kept us in line by whacking us on the knuckles with a ruler and other forms of intense discipline.
Yeah. I went to Catholic school for 9 years, so I'm familiar with some of that. You know, mainly facilitated by nuns. We had a lot of priests, but the nuns were the disciplinarians during my upbringing. So,
in one sense, it was not that challenging because I had just come from a Scottish boys' boarding school, where the discipline was very physical, and the beatings were quite regular. And in fact, the school did not have. It was a roughly 7th through 12th grade school, and I was in the lowest grade. And the school had no professional or no paid janitors or groundskeepers or anything. The boys did everything. We did all the cleaning and taking care of the grounds. It was old school, a British boarding school.
yeah, okay. All right, I'm going to call a timeout here real quick, and I've just got to check with our editor because you broke up a lot during that.
It's breaking up on my end.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. You may just need to redo that one question there. You look stable now.
Okay, all right, so things seem to have stabilized. So the one I did before this was really bad. Like I don't know if we got to the end of that discussion or not, but hopefully we got you.
I don't, as a point of reference, I rarely have any problems with my Zoom. So I'm not saying it's not on my end. I'm just normally, I do a lot of Zoom training and I don't have any problems. But anyway.
So I missed every bit of that. Did
Okay.
Yeah, you're back. Hang on just a second.
I'm going to switch to Wi-Fi and see if that
Okay. All right, we're going to try something else on our end. Hey, stand by for just a second while he does an adjustment here. Okay, there you are. All right, on our end, is that a more stable Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that should be stable now.
Okay. Okay, try it again, Brad. I'm going to pick it up from, I'm going to ask you that high school question one
Okay.
more time, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
So you moved around a lot. You spent some time in Scotland. Where did you finally graduate high school?
When we came back from Scotland, we moved to Washington, D.C. and stayed there for several years. My father had a tour in Vietnam, but of course the family stayed in D.C. So I attended St. John's College High School in Washington, D.C. for 4 years, from 9th through 12th grade. And it was a Catholic boys military high school, Army
Wow.
Junior ROTC. So we wore uniform every day, 5 days a week, and had to shine our shoes and keep our hair cut. And we were taught in the classroom by Christian brothers and also by a cadre of retired Army, senior enlisted, and one colonel. And these were World War II veterans. teaching us in the late 60s and early 70s how to march with and shoot a rifle by the age of 14 or 15. It was quite an experience.
Wow, that's a military-heavy Catholic institution. I don't know if it gets any better or any worse than that. So,
well, one interesting thing is that I had just come from a Scottish boys' boarding school in Scotland, and the discipline there was very intense. It was very physical. Corporal punishment was the name of the game.
Wow.
And also, us 200 boys who were roughly ages 12 through 18, and I was at the bottom of that. I was 12, 13 years old. We were the janitors, we were the groundskeepers, in addition to sports and studying and all that. We had to take care of the facility. So it was a full-time job in addition to an education.
yeah, wow. Speaking of sports, was there one sport that you played in particular?
Well, this school played rugby for 2 terms and cricket for 1 term, and that was kind of it. There wasn't a large variety of sports. I personally enjoyed the brief time of playing rugby. I was by far the biggest boy in my class just because I had grown a lot at the age of 11 and 12 years old, so I towered over the rest of the boys. So it was the one time in my life that I was pretty good at a sport, second row of the rugby team.
Okay, so you're not playing rugby these days?
No, no. I exercise, but I'm not much of an athlete.
Okay, all right. So, and then Naval Academy. So, it must have been during high school, is when you applied for the Naval Academy, and what was that process like?
Well, once again, my father was a very encouraging man. He never suggested to anybody what they should do with their life. And he never ever suggested to me, you should go in the Navy, you should go to the Naval Academy. I just wanted to be like him. And so he was very helpful. I was interviewed. You're probably familiar with the radio station in Norfolk, AM 790 with Tony McCreaney.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Tony interviewed me once, and he actually called my father up during the interview and got my father on the phone. So we were both being interviewed, and he said, "Captain McDonald, when did you first know your son was going to go to the Naval Academy?" I think he expected my dad to say, "Well, the minute he was born." And my father said, "I first knew he was going to go to the Naval Academy when I came home from work one day, and he was standing in the doorway with his acceptance letter to the Naval Academy." So my dad helped me with the process, but he never pushed me. He just wanted me to do what I wanted to do.
Wow. And so submarines were submarines, in your crosshairs, so to speak, upon acceptance to the Naval Academy?
I was always enamored with that because of my father's submarine career, but I had an open mind at the Naval Academy and really looked at everything from being a Marine to being a Navy pilot to being a surface warfare officer and being a submariner. And I think the thing that swayed me towards submarines, well, I think they're all great careers, and I encourage any person who goes to any service academy, you're going to have a good time and a good career and have all the tools you need to be successful. But in my case, I observed that I actually spent my first class summer, the summer between your 3rd and 4th year, on board USS Nimitz in the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow.
This was on her maiden deployment in 1976. And I observed that the aviators, while a very glamorous job, a pilot goes off in his fighter jet or his helicopter or whatever, and he does something kind of on his own, in a sense. And the captain, the commanding officer of an aviation squadron, is in charge of a team and has an important role. But that team goes off and does their mission by themselves. On a submarine, I observed the captain, during my little bit of time that I did spend on a submarine while I was at the Naval Academy, the operation of the ship really depended on that person more than any other ship depended on the one person. And I kind of like that idea as far as a career, if I was going to stay in and shoot for that goal that I had since I was 9 years old to be a submarine captain, that idea of the whole ship focusing in on the supervision of that one person during critical moments was impressive to me.
You know, I can totally relate to that. My career, Navy Special Operations, Navy EOD, it's the same thing. You know, we have, there's a company level organization, but then we have platoons and we even have fire teams, you know, amongst the platoons. And we deploy often in 2-man teams, a 4, a 6, and 8, you know, a 15-person platoon. But never is the whole organization working on the same mission at the same time together, the way you just described it.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons I can relate to that so well is now 15 years in the private sector, 12 years of owning my own business, and 40 people on the team. We see, I see exactly what you're talking about. This team works together every single day, and we're all pursuing the same objectives and helping each other and knowing how to help each other. So it's really, really relevant. So finished the Naval Academy, selected for submarines. Where did you do your initial submarine training?
Well, I was afforded the opportunity right at graduation to go straight to a submarine and go on a Western Pacific deployment before I actually started the submarine training pipeline. This was very unusual, kind of out of the ordinary. And I had read Shogun and other James Clavell books about Asia as a teenager, and I was very enamored with the whole Asian thing. And so I really did a little research, had some help from one of my father's friends, found out about a submarine that was going to be leaving San Diego in the summer of '77 to go on a Western Pacific deployment. So as a rather green ensign, probably about as green as they come, I drove across country and got on board USS Pintado, SSN 672. And the commanding officer just coincidentally had the same last name as me, McDonald. John Joseph, it was known as Jack McDonald. And we called him Mad Dog, not to his face, of course, but he was a ferocious force to be dealt with. And he was a very effective commanding officer, but he was sort of old school compared to today's ideas about leadership. And he was very, very loud, but he was a good commanding officer. And I learned a lot under him. Made that 6-month deployment. Now this was in 1977 and 78. And that was how my submarine service started. After we made it back to San Diego, I was detached to begin the normal training pipeline for submarine officers, which is 6 months of nuclear power classroom training, equivalent to getting kind of a master's degree, 6 months of operational training in an actual land-based prototype, and then 3 months of submarine school. And then, at Mad Dog's request, I was sent back to the same ship. I guess he liked me enough to have me come back. And I spent 3 more years on Pintado as a junior officer. So that's where I cut my teeth, in the Pacific and on aboard USS Pintado, making a lot of Indian Ocean and Western Pacific deployments. And of course, in those days, as you recall, the big enemy was, well, not enemy, but the big adversary was the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and you said SSN, or did you say SSBN? I missed that.
SSN, that's a fast attack submarine.
Yeah, okay. So subsurface nuclear, but a fast attack submarine nonetheless. when you, and I'm going to jump around here for a second, when you commanded the MENDEL RIVERS, was that SSN as well, a fast attack?
Yes, that was an SSN, attack submarine, similar to, I was on 4 attack submarines and 1 ballistic missile submarine.
Okay. So you wrapped up 3 years in that tour. You're probably a lieutenant now. And what's next in the pipeline for a submarine officer at that point in their career?
We were given the option to go to a couple years of shore duty to get a break from sea duty. And my family took hold then. We had our first child during that time. And then I went back to sea as the engineer officer aboard an SSBN, USS von Steuben. And that was one of the original 41 for Freedom ballistic missile submarines that were built in the mostly in the 1960s. And von Steuben was, like all those SSBNs, it was a two-crew submarine, blue crew and a gold crew. I was the engineer officer, and I spent a couple years making ballistic missile patrols as the engineer officer aboard von Steuben. We lived in Charleston, and the submarine operated out of Kings Bay, Georgia.
Okay, so a SSBN is part of the triad. Is that correct? The nuclear triad.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and can you just talk about the strategic significance of that, especially during that time frame, as you mentioned, with the Soviets as a primary adversary?
Well, as you mentioned, the strategic triad, and of course the three parts of that are the ICBMs, the ballistic missiles that are land-based around the country. The second part is the Air Force bombers, and the third part is the Navy SSBNs, the ballistic missile submarines. Now, it may be just a boast because from the Navy, but we like to say that we're the most survivable part of that three-part triad. And the big advantage a ballistic missile submarine has is that nobody knows where it is. And in fact, only a handful of people on the submarine actually know where it is. So that's when you're on a ballistic missile submarine, your job is to be, when you're at sea on alert patrol, is to be undetected, of course underwater, and it could be as much as 60 days. And you're in constant communication, meaning able to receive messages coming in 24 hours a day. There's various methods to do that. And you just have to be on alert status, which means within a couple minutes you could be in position to launch missiles. So those submarines, the ones that I was on, when they were first created in the early 1960s, like the reason my family lived in Scotland was the missiles had a relatively short range, just 1,200 miles. But when I was in ballistic missile submarines, the range was about 5,000 miles. So we were able to deploy from Georgia, and not long after we got out into the Atlantic Ocean, we would be within target range. Doesn't give me a lot of pleasure talking about all this firepower, but that's the reality of it. Is that that's what those submarines are there, nuclear deterrence.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, nuclear deterrence, another key term, especially during that time frame. The recent, the events with Iran, in particular, a U.S. submarine by use of firing a torpedo sank an Iranian vessel. Do you have any observations or commentary? Is there anything you can share with us? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm a little bit of an armchair quarterback here, of course, with the advantage of having been many hours of my life on a periscope making observations on ships and things like that. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, in my opinion, that was probably a relatively easy shot. That the way we trained in the 1980s with the main adversary, when I went to a submarine officer advanced course in 1984, we're getting ready to be a department head, we spent 6 months studying primarily Russians, Soviet ships, and how to combat them, how to be in combat with them. And the idea was it was going to be a war of attrition, meaning you would catch a Soviet battle group coming over the horizon, and from as far away as possible, like 12,000 yards, 6 miles, you would launch a barrage of torpedoes and then get out of there as fast as you could, because once they knew something was coming, they're going to start shooting down that bearing. And you didn't stick around to watch, the idea wasn't you're not going to stick around to watch the results. You're just going to get out of there to try to survive. Mm-hmm. So the fact that this submarine that sank the Iranian destroyer was able to calmly sit there and watch the results indicated they didn't have a lot of concern about being fired back upon. The element of not only surprise was on their side, but they were probably, I'm guessing, half as far as what I described we would be shooting a Soviet battle group in the 1980s. I'm guessing, just a guess, 2 to 4 miles away, which is relatively close. So all in all, comparatively easy shot.
Yeah, Yeah, and a low threat environment for sure. And then was that, and obviously if you can't discuss things, I get that. Was that shot aimed at the running gear? You know, is that part of the strategy when firing torpedoes?
Well, my torpedo knowledge is fairly dated, but I think fundamentally it still works the same way. And the torpedo is launched at a point. Of course, what you're shooting at is a moving target. So it's like shooting skeet. You want to aim where the target's going to be, not where it is. And so the geometry is set up to shoot the torpedo to an intercept point where about 2,000 yards, I'm using a rough number, away from where it expects the target to be, it's going to start its own sonar, and it's going to be pinging. And once it detects the target, it's going to lock on. And it's just going to try to go 8 feet underneath the target. It's not aiming for a certain part of the ship. Now that's a part of the torpedo technology that may have advanced since my day, but I'm not aware of anything that has it going under one part of the ship or the other. It's just trying to get under the ship, 8 feet under, and then it blows up. And the idea when you're underneath is you break the keel with that explosion as opposed to hitting it in the side of the ship.
Okay. And so you said that there's math involved, and I'm thinking like Hunt for Red October or some of the other submarine movies. You know, I have a solution. Is that a term for targeting in submarine warfare?
Absolutely, yes. And I'm a big fan of World War II submarine history. Read a lot of books about the submarines in the Pacific Ocean in World War II. And of course, my dad was on submarines that were built and served during World War II. Those guys, of course, didn't have the digital computers that we have. Mm-hmm. Everything was analog. And the geometry, figuring out that geometry, and they had to shoot from a much closer range. They had to shoot within 2,000 yards normally, whereas with their torpedoes didn't have the sonar system as part of the torpedo that their torpedoes today have. So they had to get very close and shoot a spread of torpedoes, once again aiming where they thought the target was going to be. And that depends on understanding the course of the target, the speed of the target, all those things. And they had a thing called a TDC, Torpedo Data Computer, which was an analog device. And being a good TDC operator was a very challenging job. And it involved understanding trigonometry, geometry, algebra, and being able to do things in your head quickly and come up with the right solution. So you're absolutely right. Target solution is everything, and then firing position. I'm trying to remember the things we were taught about shooting torpedoes, and you always ask yourself, the idea was in combat, you would ask yourself 3 questions. Do I have a valid target? Is what I'm about to shoot at an actual valid target? And if you're shooting at a submerged target, just based on some noises on sonar, that's a little more challenging when you can't see it. So that's the captain's job. Do I have a valid target? Do I have a firing solution? Back to your point. And am I within weapons range? And the idea was once you have 3 yeses, you shoot. You don't waste any more time, as we say, polishing the cannonball. And it was the same thing in World War II. Their challenge in those days was to get in position close, at periscope depth, and not be seen by the enemy.
So, speaking of World War II, or even post-World War II, a lot of movies about submarine warfare. Is there one in particular that you think is your favorite? Is there one in particular that depicts things close to accurate?
Well, of course, I'm going out on a limb here because I wasn't around during World War II, but the one movie that I've always thought is the only submarine movie I've ever seen that seems realistic to me is Das Boot, or Das Boot. And it's amazing how I watched that movie all the way through, and of course it's about a German U-boat submarine crew. And by the end of the movie, I'm almost a little sympathetic towards the cause of that particular crew, because you get to know them. So that movie seems to be. I mean, it's like you can smell the people after a while. You can the grime, the unshaved faces, and it just seems very realistic to me.
Wow. Okay. And then modern day, I think, Hunt for Red October, obviously a Clancy novel that turned into a great movie with a great cast of actors. Is there anything? It seems to me there was one or two after that, but is there any modern day movies that you found?
Well, there was Crimson Tide after Hunt for Red October.
That's right. Gene Hackman.
Right. I thought they were entertaining movies. They certainly weren't very realistic. And Hunt for Red October was actually, a lot of that was filmed at the Submarine Training Center in San Diego around 1989, right before the movie came out, of course. And I was nearby. The submarine I was operating on was operating on San Diego. I was never part of the set or on the set or anything like that, but I was nearby. I was aware of that. When the movie came out, I remember seeing it, and I remember thinking, this is a very entertaining movie, but it's not very realistic. There was one thing in that whole movie, in my opinion, that bore any relationship to the truth, and that was when the first class Thurman Jones yelled, "Crazy Ivan." And Crazy Ivan was something that was a name we gave to a maneuver the Soviets would do. And if you were following a Soviet submarine, because those guys in those days knew that they had inferior sonar systems to ours. Now today, I think it's all different. But they knew that there was a possibility they were being followed and they couldn't hear us. So about once every couple days, out of nowhere, they would just reverse course 180 degrees, speed up and go right back where they came from, hoping that if there was an American back there, that it would spook us, cause us to speed up to get out of the way, and thereby give up our position by making noise. So I always felt like when a Russian did something like that, I always felt like the guy's got a death wish. He doesn't care what happens when he runs back down the track there. So that one little thing seemed a little bit realistic in the movie.
Wow. Okay. And then, of course, was it 4 years ago, I think, the submersible that imploded on its way to the Titanic, like the Titan Gate? What was that?
I think it was Titan.
Yeah.
As a side note, you might remember that you're the one that gave my name to the network, and they called me up, which led to 8 interviews over the next 3 days. On a couple different networks.
Yeah, no, that was great. I did, because I was on there talking about the salvage operation, and they asked if I knew anybody. And this was shortly after you were on the Elevate Your Leadership podcast, and I said, I actually know probably the best person you could talk to.
Well, I'm not an expert on deep submersibles, and I told them right up front that we just talked about submarines and what it's like to be underwater and things like that.
Yeah.
And once again, as a side note, not to get sidetracked here, but I remember thinking at the time, I know 1,000 or more submariners, and I don't know a single one that would be willing to get inside that Titan and even go down to a depth of 15 feet, much less 12,000 feet.
Yeah, holy cow! Yeah, that was definitely something. So, and during that time frame, I kind of met you through a mutual friend, and then business channels, and you wrote a book that is really a book about business, which I want to get to in a second. But let's round out your military career, and I realize we're not doing your military career justice. How many years did you serve, and what year did you retire?
Well, when it's all said and done, I was in uniform for 28 years. I was a commissioned officer for 24 years. And I retired so long ago now that I've been out almost as long as I was on active duty. I retired in October of 2001.
Okay, all right. So
I waited till my dad retired right after he swore me in as a midshipman. And I retired right after I swore my son in as a midshipman. And we had from 1944 to 2025, some McDonald on active duty continuously. So what is that, about 81 years or something like that?
That's incredible.
So,
That's
one of my dad's other grandsons is still on active duty, so his streak is still running.
That's incredible. So did your son retire recently?
He retired a year ago from the United States Navy, yes. He graduated in 2005. Yeah.
Wow. What did he do in the Navy?
He was a submariner until he was medically disqualified for kidney stone about halfway through his 20 years. And then he was an
Okay.
engineering duty officer after that.
Okay. Wow, that's cool. So literally in your DNA, in your son's DNA, I just think that is so cool.
Now, but can I tell you for a second that his son, my grandson, claims he's going to go to the Naval Academy in the class of 2036, but he's already informed me that he's going to be a pilot, not a submariner.
Okay. All right. Well, 2036, that's 10 years. He's thinking ahead.
Right.
Kind of like you did when you said when you
Yeah.
rode on your dad's submarine. That's incredible. So after your retirement, what was the next thing for you?
Well, I went into the, I tell people I wanted a job where I was honored and revered and respected like I had been as a submarine captain, so I started selling life insurance. And the honor and respect and reverence wasn't quite there. But I did, I was in the world of financial advisor for about 2.5 years. And all of those traumatic experiences, the Scottish boarding school, the military high school, the 20 years in submarines, did not actually prepare me for the emotional trauma I would face as a commissioned salesperson. And I found out that was scarier than going up against the Soviets. So, but a fellow called me up a year into that time and said, "I'm a sales coach. You want to talk?" I didn't even know what a sales coach was. But I said, "All right, I'll talk." And in a very short period of time, he convinced me to give him what seemed like an enormous sum of money to coach me. And it was probably one of the smartest moves I made. It was very successful for me. And I got so much out of it, I thought to myself, I think I want to do what he's doing. I don't want to keep selling insurance and investments. But I did, so as I was trying to figure out, I was not totally fulfilled with that career in the financial world. I asked myself 4 questions about what I wanted to spend the rest of my working years doing. And I thought about it for a long time and journaled. And the 4 questions were, what do I love doing? What do I think I might be good at? What has somebody else told me I'm good at? And what do I think my innate or God-given skills or talents are? And for better or worse, I came up with 6 words, and those 6 words led me to thinking that I needed to be in some type of training, mentoring role, teaching, standing in front of a room or something like that. So I started a Sandler franchise in Norfolk and began life as a sales and business trainer and coach.
Okay, and of course I have to ask you what those 6 words were.
Okay. Writing, speaking, teaching, training, mentoring, nurturing. I'm not telling you I'm great at all those. I'm just telling you that was the end of my journal. I came up with those 6 words, and I said, where can I write, speak, teach, train, so on and so forth. And
Gotcha.
Tony
Didn't you
Acrini
have-
already had a lock on DJ in Norfolk, so I
Yeah.
wasn't going to replace him.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah, he's been there a while, so I'd keep my eyes and ears open. So, then there's also WRVA up in Richmond. So, didn't you have a philosophy, a similar 6-word philosophy that you led by when you were on active duty?
You're breaking up on me. I'm probably breaking up on you.
Yep. All right. Did you catch that last question?
You were said, did you have a philosophy? And then I lost it.
Oh, okay. So they'll edit all this, so I'll just go back to that question.
Okay.
So speaking of the 6 words that you adopted post-military career, did you have or didn't you have some type of leadership philosophy very similar that helped guide you during your days on active duty?
Well, one thing that I do in my business now, when I'm not trying to coach big-time CEOs, I coach and train mid-level managers or people that are moving into mid-level management maybe for the first time in their life. And one of the things we do is I lead them through creating their own leadership philosophy. And you remember from your time in the Navy, most commanding officers have a command policy or something in the form of a letter that they give to members of the crew. And it kind of says, this is me, this is how I intend to run the ship or the unit or the detachment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great idea to have something like that in the civilian world too. So before I went to command, I developed what I called my leadership principles. I'm not sure where I got that idea from. I'm not going to claim it's an original idea because somebody else might have thought of it too. But I wanted a very simple set of rules for me, things that I would always adhere to. And so I came up with my 7 leadership principles. The first one, is it okay if I tell you what they were? It won't take too much time.
100%. Yeah, no, I love this. This actually, this is huge in business coaching and mentorship, so please share.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the things that I spend time with people, is helping them, getting them to develop their own leadership principles. And I don't want people to copy mine, not because I don't like being emulated, but because I want them to think, what is it about themselves. But mine were, number 1, be approachable and in control of yourself. And you've seen leaders who lose their head over every little thing and yell and scream, and at some point that becomes ineffective. And I wanted to remind myself, somebody brings me bad news, I'm going to embrace it, I'm going to welcome it, because if I go crazy on this person when they bring me bad news, they're going to stop bringing me bad news. So number 1, be approachable and in control of yourself. The corollary to that was, if you can't control yourself, how will the crew believe you can control the ship in a time of emergency or combat? Number 2, be consistent. And I thought I'd rather work for a guy that's a jerk every day than a guy that's a jerk on one day and a nice guy the second day and unknown the third day. Third, be fair and just. Now, particularly in the military, commanding officers have a lot of authority. And of course, a captain of a ship can take away a sailor's pay, you can confine him to the ship, you can reduce his rank. So with all this power, I had to ask myself each day, have I been fair and just today? We tell our kids life's not fair. Nonetheless, be fair and just. Number 4, set the standards. The CO sets the standards. My belief in life in general is that people who are subordinate to you or me generally will not attempt to set a higher standard than that which they see from you or me, from their boss. They're not going to have a better haircut, they're not going to have shinier shoes. I always believed that the best uniform on the ship was going to be mine, whatever it looked like. And when that ship my dad was on in Scotland when I was 11, 12 years old, the submarine tender, he would take me on there sometimes when I wasn't at the boarding school on a Saturday morning, and I didn't care what I did. I would sit in the stateroom and stare. But one Saturday we're walking off the ship, and as we're walking off the ship on the weather deck, he said to me, just stop, stand right there. And he walked off and came back with a sailor, and he told the guy to get a rag and clean up this little few drops of oil on the deck under this valve. And on the small boat going to shore, I said to my dad, you're a really important guy. Why are you worried about 2 little drops of oil on the deck? And he said, if I walk past that oil, there'll be oil all over this ship in no time flat. And it took me a while to figure out what he meant. But I remembered that myself. Whatever I walk past on the ship, that's the standard. Trash on the deck, oil on the deck, somebody doing something they're not supposed to. So number 4, set the standards. And number 5, continuously supply energy and enthusiasm for whatever is to be done. It's kind of an extension of the previous rule. There's every job on the planet has its grunt work, and in the Navy, the things sailors hate, field day, stores load, things like that. And my belief was, however enthusiastic I am about field day, that's the most enthusiasm I'm going to get out of the crew. Mm-hmm. So they need to see energy and enthusiasm from their leaders. What was that? Number 5. Number 6 was be yourself, but always be the fill in the blank. In my case, it was commanding officer. And you may have heard the story over a century ago about a British admiral speaking to his flotilla commanders of ships in his group, and he said, "Your sailors will never forget the sight of you pushing a pickle down the bar with your nose." And what he was referring to was a game that British sailors played where they would get on the bar on all fours and push a pickle down the bar with their nose, and at the end of the bar there'd be a shot glass and they would take a shot. And his point was, if you want to go out with your men, you go out for one glass of wine and then you go back to the ship. They don't need a friend, they need a commanding officer. People need a leader. Now, occasionally you may be a little bit of a social worker, you may be a little bit of a priest, you may be a little bit of a mother, a father, a sheriff, things like that, like every good XO, every ship is. But the point is, be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. I'm not Bob, and Bob's not Brad. But always be the fill in the blank. Whatever your role is, be the role. And number 7 was make the troops proud that I'm their CO. As you and I both have heard plenty of times be told, they don't have to love us, but we want them. When I walk down the pier in the morning when the ship's in port, I wanted the topside watch thinking, I'm glad that guy's coming to my ship. And I didn't want him thinking, I wish that SOB was going to that submarine over there. Because you want them to have confidence that if they're going into combat, you're the person that's going to lead them. So make the troops proud that I'm their CO. So those were the 7 principles that I had in my little wheel book that I carried in my pocket and referred to daily.
Yeah, and great principles. I'm sure that's part of your teaching today when you mentor and teach up-and-coming leaders, because those principles certainly apply every bit to the private sector as they do to you being the commanding officer of a ship or really serving in other leadership roles.
Yeah, and then beyond that, I encourage people to, that's just one piece of their leadership philosophy, and it is their leadership principles. In other words, I give you a copy of my leadership philosophy. I'm telling you, this is what you can expect me to tell myself. These are my principles. But then there's other things, my expectations of you, the values, what's important, what are my absolute must-haves, how will I react in situations. So it's basically a 1 to 1.5 page document that says, this is how I lead, this is what I expect of you, this is what I won't tolerate, so on and so forth. Kind of like,
yeah,
I warned you.
Yeah, for sure. You know what I love about that too, though, is you're applying it to yourself first and foremost. And so I believe that, and part of what I mentor and what I teach people is all leaders should have their own personal definition of the word leadership. What does that word mean to me? And I do have my own definition, and I'll share that definition with others so they know what to expect. But first and foremost, I need to check myself every day and say, am I acting within my personal definition of the word leadership? Am I leading according to my doctrine? And more importantly, if I'm starting to deviate, it's a very useful way to keep yourself from deviating, but also bring you back on course if you if you deviate a little bit. So
Yeah.
So now, are you one-on-one? Do you still have, you had a franchise for a while? Are you still doing that? Or where are you career-wise now?
Well, I am still in the business, but I'm part-time. When I was in Norfolk, I had a full-time training center, and it was a full-time business. I sold the business, but I have stayed active as sort of an associate. When I sold the business in 2015, I was hired by the Sandler Home Office up in Maryland, near Baltimore, as a national coach for other franchisees. So for 7 years, I trained all the new franchisees that came in and would coach them the first few years they're in business. And then I just kind of moved gently back into the field, and I'm affiliated with a Virginia franchise. So I work kind of part-time in the business. The one thing that you know as well as I know that every salesperson has to do, and I can't imagine anybody likes it, is prospect. When people tell me they enjoy cold calls, I say, well, you haven't made any. So I got pretty good at prospecting, but I never enjoyed it. And that's the grunt work. We talked about grunt work a minute ago.
Yeah.
And the grunt work of sales is prospecting. So I got good at it, didn't enjoy it, and that's why I sold the business. So now I just work with existing clients, or if people happen to stumble upon me, but I'm not doing the hard part of sales anymore, which is prospecting. I love the sales process, I love the coaching and the training, but no more going out looking for people. No more cold calls.
Okay. And when you're not prospecting, when you're not helping others develop, what do you do for fun?
Oh, well, this morning my wife and I went on a 25-mile bike ride.
Oh, we might be on a little time out here.
Okay. How about now?
All right, looks like I got you back. All right, so I'm just gonna repeat the last question. So when you're not prospecting, when you're not training and helping others, what does Brad McDonald do for fun?
Well, it's interesting. You just asked a minute ago we talked about what I don't like about sales. And one of the little exercises I do with people is I call it the energy tank exercise. And we make a list of things that put energy in your tank and a list of things that drain energy from your tank. And the number one thing that drained my energy was prospecting, but we already got rid of that. So things that give me energy are long bike rides, swimming, woodworking, and I have 8, soon to be 9 grandchildren, and they're within striking distance for the day.
That's great.
So that keeps me busy, and I do a few hours a day of coaching and training. So trying to stay in shape as I get old and stay active. You know how that goes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, stay healthy, stay active, stay engaged, no doubt about it. What haven't I asked you, Brad? Is there anything, I mean, you've done a lot in your career, and I realize most of it you can't really discuss in detail, but is there some big defining moment in your life, that I haven't touched on, or something else you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I don't know about a defining moment, but it's interesting you ask that question. We started this conversation talking about how I got interested in the Navy and the Naval Academy. And as I was thinking about this before we got together today, I thought about this Navy fight song that we had to learn as plebes at the Naval Academy. That first summer, which is kind of like boot camp, you had to sing songs everywhere you were marching. And one of the songs says, refers to the midshipmen at the Naval Academy as the spoiled and pampered pets of Uncle Sam. And I think there's some truth to that. And most people that in the Navy that didn't go to the Naval Academy do have a little bit of that impression that these guys are the spoiled and pampered pets of Uncle Sam. And I admit that there's probably some reason for thinking that we act that way. On the other hand, you referred to a defining moment. I thought I would read a passage which I think means a lot to me as far as defining moments in my life. And it comes from this book, The Admirals. And the Admirals is about the 4 5-star admirals that led the U.S. Navy during World War II, Leahy, King, Halsey, and Nimitz. And of course, all 4 of these gentlemen started their career in Annapolis at the Naval Academy in the classes of 1897, 1901, 1904, and 1905. And so this passage, if I can just take a second to read this,
Please.
is the end of the book. After going through World War II and that tough time in the country's history. In 1953, after World War II was fought and won, a newspaper editor asked one of America's fleet admirals to participate in a series of articles by celebrated people on the turning point in their careers. Looking back, the newsman queried, what single act, incident, influence, or encouragement set you in the direction of success instead of failure? The 78-year-old admiral to whom this was addressed wrote in the first sentence of his reply he was unable to remember any acts, incidents, or influence that were turning points in my career. But then he went on for 4 tight pages to reminisce about his time at the United States Naval Academy and the importance of those years and the relationships he had formed there 60 years before to the man he became. Those of us who departed from the United States Naval Academy, Fleet Admiral William D. Leahy concluded, had acquired the requisite skills, but without conscious effort had also acquired something more. You will, Leahy once told graduating midshipmen, all have to a greater or lesser degree something else that is intangible. A combination of loyalty to ideals, tradition, courage, devotion, clean living, and clear thinking. It is more than esprit de corps because it reaches far beyond the corps and comradeship. Just as this intangible element defined the Navy's 4 fleet admirals, it characterizes all who pass through the gates of the United States Naval Academy and inexorably binds them to the Navy, to one another, and to the steadfast service of their country. This was part of my inspiration for creating what I'm approaching the finishing stages of, which is a 50-year yearbook for my Naval Academy class. We graduated in 1977, so next year is our 50th anniversary of our graduation. And what I have, the idea was anybody that wanted to participate out of the roughly 950 graduates in our class could send in a one-page, call it whatever you want, bio or letter, discussing the last 50 years of their life, kind of what I did after the Naval Academy. And we have almost 400 inputs now. And it's been fascinating to me to read these things, all the different things that all these, of course in my case the class was all male, but all of my classmates have done. And can I read you one more thing?
Please do, absolutely.
So this is from my letter. That's the opening of the book. Letter from the editor, because I'm the chief instigator of this project. So this is just a portion of the letter. As the editor of this project, I've read each of your stories, inspiring, funny, candid in relating failures and success, and universal in expressing gratitude for our class and our classmates. I did not anticipate the strong nostalgia and range of emotions I would experience reading your life stories. Nostalgia comes from the Greek words nostos, return home, and algos, pain or ache. You too will experience these as you peruse these pages. Our past can be a safe place, a chance to return home and relive wonderful experiences. I don't necessarily mean the chow calls, marching on the red beach, endless parades, all-nighters, but rather that we did it together, sharing in challenges, successes, and great times, including beating Army all 4 years. That inextricably bonded us for life in ways that others cannot begin to understand. It's paradoxical that while we were at the Naval Academy, we could not wait to get away from that place. Yet the rest of our days are spent being so grateful for the experience. As is so well expressed in the following words, this is one of my classmates who submitted a document, Hammerin Hank Donegan, who wrote, "The Naval Academy did more than prepare us for war. It shaped our character for a lifetime of service. The class of 77 has stood watch in distant deserts, on restless seas, and in quiet posts far from home. We have borne burdens, endured loss, and carried one another forward. 50 years later, I remain grateful for the brotherhood of 11th Company, for the faith that steadied us in uncertain hours, and for the enduring privilege of having stood that watch beside you. I look forward to seeing you all, seasoned by time, strengthened by experience, and still faithful to the oath we once took together." So, I'm not sure what comes through when you listen to those words.
Let me tell you what comes through. A bond that was formed very deliberately, even though you didn't really know it at the time, that has lasted a lifetime. And I feel that, I didn't go to the academy, I was enlisted to begin with, but going through diver training and EOD training, and those bonds and those teammates, they're in my heart today, just the way you expressed the appreciation of those teammates from your heart.
I thought you would relate to that, because whoever you were taking a swim test next to, or freezing in the surf, whatever was going on, you could have not seen that guy for 50 years, and then now you see him, and you pick up like you're two 21-year-olds again.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody, these are people that we actually love. We develop a love for our teammates over the course of time, and it really is something unique, I think, to military service.
So going back to your question, defining event, I think it's these relationships that we've formed, and I'm not saying it's some great accomplishment to have 80 years of continuous naval service and a family, but I think that's somewhat defined who I've become, and my son, and my father, and so on and so forth. So
A life
that's
well
probably
lived.
my best answer.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I appreciate it. Brad McDonald, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge, your wisdom, and your heart with the listeners today. It's always wonderful to talk to you. And by the way, is your book still available on Amazon?
I believe it is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the art and skill of sales psychology.
Okay, and I read it probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I highly recommend it for people, anybody in the business world. Brad, thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure. Hope we get the chance to talk again.
You bet.